Good morning.
This is what happens to us at this age. The bones begin to crack and we forget why we entered rooms. While holding our keys and wondering why we're doing that too. I don't know.
We need to step back out.
Yes, you have to retrace your steps. Morning.
Morning.
Today's my 1-year anniversary.
Hey, happy anniversary.
At the college.
Happy anniversary. You know what? August 9th, when's August 9th? That'll be like 29th.
Wow.
August 9th.
So for the 30th, you have to do something pretty fabulous.
Retire.
That's what I was thinking. That's pretty fabulous.
Last night I saw you coming down the street. And I'm like, oh great, at least I had my sweaty shirt from working out
Right?
up on the truck and I'm
Give a
like,
couple more in
great,
case
I see
anybody comes
Melanie
in.
walking down the road.
Was I walking the dog?
You were walking with the kids. and-
Oh, yeah, we were going to the park.
Yeah. Yeah, that was us that waited for you.
Yeah, I thought that was you, but it was hard.
Most Monday, we
over
always
there.
do most Monday on Monday
I'm
night.
just using the desk. So the dog park is happening at 7:30 every night of the week.
Oh, yeah.
That's when we take him so he can wear himself out the most. All the other dogs.
It's the happening thing for the dogs or the adults?
It's the dogs. Because a lot of the adults really do like a middle school dance kind of separation.
Okay.
There's a few that don't get along with one another for whatever reason.
So the dogs play this game with the adults.
Exactly, it's sort of an odd. Okay. Odd thing.
So I think that. Used to that.
We did trivia on Monday, we did movie trivia,
Oh, yeah.
and we would have won. Okay. Me and my shabby little team, just making sure everybody else had teams of 10. And they asked Disney questions. I don't have kids that watch Disney.
Lisa would have been good. Let me know next time they do movie night.
I will. Well, I mean,
Well, Lisa needs to know.
they were asking questions about Frozen. I have boys. I've never even seen Frozen, and I'm okay with
Don't say it.
Lisa.
that. Sorry,
Lisa
no,
always
no.
asks me, she's
I don't
like-
even know
she's
it.
like,
I'm
as a
glad for
kid,
that.
did you watch anything like any of the kids' movies? She knows all the kids' movies and all the answers to everything.
See, they need a full like Godfather one.
Yeah.
Like, give me one that's all westerns, all Godfather movies.
Rocky.
Yeah, anything that's like in the pop culture stuff. We got that. So, when it
Good
came to
morning.
Disney, we have no idea.
So Marissa's gonna turn on the life size for us.
There it goes.
I'll get here in a minute.
Morning, Fred.
sorry. I can fit another chair over here.
Welcome to the conference. You are the first participant to join the conference.
Hi.
Morning, Pam.
Who's in my chair?
That was-
Did you just move down there, bro? Where are you sitting?
Yeah, no, I'm here. It's just.
Okay.
When the music stops.
Conversing with
You can pull up one of those.
Dr. Jeanette. I have a whole list of stuff I need you to sign.
I'll take care of it. All right, not a problem. Thank you.
Okay?
Yes, we'll take care.
Brian's on vacation.
I see. I've been signing some stuff for him. Okay,
Yeah. And I'll have more,
okay. I'll be here
probably.
afternoon. I'll be here tomorrow until 2, then I'm going to North Campus. What is he getting back?
I have no idea. He might be back tomorrow,
Okay, all right.
but I don't know.
Okay.
I'm hoping not. He needs a vacation.
Hello, Ed.
I like.
I just had some.
How you feeling? Better? Wow.
Surgery, actually.
And do they continue to tighten it with a different
No.
angle?
The whole purpose
They just.
is to start locking my arm about right there. They can't straighten out. What they had to do, cut an incision right in here, take the bicep and then they drill a hole in the bone there, and they run the tendon down to the bone. And they actually sew a button and put it tight against the bone, and then that's where it's hooked. But until it goes back to the bone, you can't straighten the arm. The more you do that, the more tension it is. In the first week, I had a cast. I couldn't even get it straight. It was so bulky, but they put steel rods in here because they didn't want it to bend. It was on the outside. Take it all down.
Wow.
And, yeah, it was, and I couldn't. About all I could.
Well, you can do some healthy reading.
Yeah. Reading a book for years old. Features a company that no
Oh.
longer exists.
I told that. But some of the still resonate. Yeah. So you did your homework assignment. All right. What's going on, Gary? All right. Everything okay? Good.
The most important one. That's how this is the one I was waiting for.
Yeah, but I didn't even print everything out.
Good morning.
I didn't have time to print it all out today.
So this was
I understand that. And this is only part of it. You know, when you send me 3 pages of document, a document, and then it says, read this stuff. I read every word. And this says, and I catch little things all the time. Right, Brian? I read every word. And then I send it to you.
Good morning.
I could feel
It's not fun. It's not fun. It's mind numbing.
the hardest part about it. One is because she gets it not only.
And then I need to talk to you.
These are so that's the hard part.
No.
Anyway, I just said.
Well, and you're back at it before you know it. First thing you know, it feels like 5 days. This is not a fun situation.
What are you guys gonna do on your?
That's my stress reliever. So I shut on my gym, and sound like
Helped my friend pack her 5,000 square foot house, which is moving. A friend of mine, she owns a
It does a
huge
better
house.
job than others. Yeah, we understand that. That's not good. I'm just saying.
Yeah, she did hire she's selling like everything. So she hired an estate person. She's moving things around so they know what to sell, what not to sell, and
You're such a good friend.
There's something about the laws, it's like they didn't rent stuff in it for like 20 years, right? And when I started thinking, it just wouldn't. Stuff.
there's the other one. Small print.
You gotta have your own choice. You know why? Like my aunt, we had a big bird. She didn't have driver's license because where she lived in New Jersey, you could walk a lot, but it's to the city. Because she never had a car.
Yes, sir.
I guess you could throw it in the garden. They would just.
Sure, the, right after that. Maybe we can do a walk-in. Yeah.
What's that?
We have academic tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's worked on real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was,
Sure.
That's where those American super guys.
Basically said. Do you ever watch that show? It's irritating though, when they go to somebody's house and they've got tons of stuff that they have for years. No, I won't take $1,000 for that thing that's only worth $300. I can't sell it. It's sentimental. You haven't seen it in years. It's up there in the corner. You don't remember it. You don't remember it. I can't take it.
And you know, they just got a, then we have a program. Yeah, so we have a program. Right. Quality of, this is just a job well done for the year, so it'd be great.
They make mistakes though.
Yeah.
They make mistakes. They make huge
Perfect.
mistakes.
and they understand.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
They realize that the paying job comes.
Gotcha, no problem. But thank you for asking.
All right, you guys ready?
Yes, sir.
I just emailed them to you, Graham, so you have Word versions of those.
Oh, sorry.
All right, so I passed out a package proposal for this morning that is a response to our last session. I'll just kind of walk through it so that we're all on the same page. I just emailed these to you as well.
That's some extras there.
Oh,
So let me, the package proposal includes the compensation article, the benefits article, that's 10 and 11. Article 7, another proposal on reduction in force. Article 14.3, which is right to privacy. And Article 12, which is the continuing contract rank article. With the exception of that last Article 12, the others we discussed last session. And Article 12, we really haven't discussed a whole lot since the very beginning of negotiations. So I'll hold that for last here. But let me walk through a couple of things. On Article 14.3 is basically us. We're agreeable as part of this package to the tweak that you had last time around, which had added some language under the subsection B, specifically the phrase college policy implemented pursuant to negotiation between the parties. We're okay with that, basically. So I think that one, if we're agreeable to the rest of the package, we're all on the same page, seems to me. Article 7, which essentially agreed with most of the changes with a couple of tweaks here. And what I've done is in the track changes format, took and showed the changes from your last proposal, which was a response to our proposal, if that makes sense. So walking through that, section 1B, we are proposing a compromise. We had the 30 days advance notice. You guys presented 60. We just proposed in the midpoint there, 45 days. Section 2, you added some language about the layoff criteria, about ranking it in descending order of importance. We accepted that language. The change is we changed the order only to put length of service instead of number 4. It's now number 5. We believe that performance evaluation, discipline, and work history should be just above that in importance. So otherwise agreed to your proposal with the exception of just reordering those two, 4 and 5. And then section 3 was the same. So those two, I feel like we're close. Article 11 benefits was the same that we presented last time. That the union indicated you would be agreeable to if we could come to terms on the rest of the package. So we left that as is, and same with Article 10. We're proposing our same compensation article that we proposed the prior time. And in a nutshell, that's to reiterate, for this past academic year, obviously we just incorporated the salary schedules as they existed. Importantly, for this coming academic year, it's the language in section 2, the 2% increase, non-recurring increase, or $1,000, whichever is greater, same as we proposed before. And for the following years, we again kicked the can down the road a little bit, said that's all still subject to negotiation, whether, and the intent there is whether that's after we have an agreement, if we have one before next spring, we would open it to talk about the following year compensation, or if we're still in the midst of negotiation finalizing this, we would obviously throw compensation back in the mix to talk about. We are interested in trying to get the 2% issue, and this year is wrapped up, some understanding wrapped up if we can today, so that we can move forward with that. But that's basically the same proposal. I'll reiterate, we did have further discussion of the step plan and instruction. We thought we had some good discussion on it last time, but frankly, we're not willing to do that. And we're pretty firm on that. It's something that could be continued discussions in future years, but for this academic year, certainly we're not going to agree to it. And then Article 12, and I do want, there is a change where probably need to tweak the compensation, our proposal. I'll come back to that second. I want Darrell to address that. He brought up an issue which we don't think is controversial, but it's not built in here yet. We can get some language, but before that, let me quickly go over Article 12. So what we have here is our proposal countering yours. It's the intent here is to take the current practice and codify it in more detail than our previous proposal, while also accepting some of the, I looked at your proposal and it seemed very similar, quite frankly, that a lot of what you had was, what you currently do was in your proposal. So I think there's a lot of overlap there. There were a little bit of changes, but we tried to accept some of the things that you're proposing and added into this. So it was too difficult to do in kind of a track changes format because it is different enough, and you'll probably need to take a caucus to go through it in more detail, I imagine. But what we did is section 1 is a continuing contract, again, taking the current structure and codifying it. Section 2 is the recertification. We also took the current IMM, codified that. I think we tweaked that a little bit to make it more clear to fact. Remember that if you satisfy in your first 5 years continuing contract requirements, then that counts as satisfying this requirement. I don't know that that was as clear in your IMM, so we wanted to make that clear that you didn't have to do both. And then section 3 was the rank, and trying to codify that with essentially what you currently have, adding some more detail. We accepted the subsection B and C is very similar to what language that you guys had proposed. I think we accepted that and added to our proposal. So if you don't have any questions as that, or if you need to caucus and come back with questions, we're happy to address it. But the general intent from us was to sort of codify the status quo, and then where we could take some of your ideas, we incorporated those. Darrell, if you wouldn't mind, give them an overview of what you were telling me on compensation. We could come up with some language. We probably want to add a couple of sentences to our compensation. What tweaks do we want to do?
So for compensation, this is more of the backdrop on the logistical side. This is a recent item that just occurred in HR and payroll, and then obviously it has occurred in the past as well. Currently, the way our faculty members are paid is on 26 pays. So if you're coming back for the next year, you're on 26 pays. As you know, most of you guys, if you're teaching in the summer or not, you got your first paycheck on August 1st for all that time. Now, the issue here is not with individuals who come back and teach. It's for the individuals that notify us, like today, yesterday, that, hey, I'm not coming back. They've already gotten paid. So now we're in a situation where we're trying to recoup those funds from those individuals, and essentially it causes a lot of issues. And we have system limitations as well. So the proposal would be that that we essentially create a blackout period for pay. Now, what that would do is it would change faculty pay from 26 pays to most likely around 24 to 25 pays. What faculty will essentially see is an increase in your pay because your pay is annualized. You're not paid per hour or anything of that nature. You get your annual salary divided by the number of pays, and that's what you see. It would just change that to 24 to 25 pays, which means you will see a bump in your pay. However, what it would also rectify on the payroll and HR side is that we're not processing payroll for August 1st for individuals who don't notify us and then don't, and if they don't come back, then essentially they owe us money and we're trying to recoup those funds. The projected date for next year, since next year is a leap year for some reason, is actually July 31st. So typically faculty pay goes from August all the way through July, basically. And we would make a proposal that the first paycheck, if I'm using this year as an example, if we had this model already built in, faculty returns on the 14th, your first paycheck would actually be on the 29th, and then the same schedule that everybody else is on all the way through the end of July. And then when you come back in August, you're not working during that time frame, so we're not overpaying any potential employees. But then as soon as you return to work, then you'll go right back to that same schedule you paid, and then it just continues at that point. So it'll create a small blackout window. The other side of that would be to hopefully have and I don't know what the appetite is. Obviously, both of these items are up for discussion. I would love to get some feedback from you guys. Would be a notification from faculty members as to when they're going to return to us, or if they're going to return to us. What would be an ideal time frame for them to let us know, so that we don't. That's another mechanism we put in place to make sure that we avoid having these issues. I'm well aware that there's, some concerns here around coming from K-12. That, there is some built-in protections at the state level. So if you have certifications, the individual fails to notify, it can go to PPS. However, at higher ed, we don't have that. So it would be more or less like a gentleman's approach. I would shake on it and say, okay, notify us by this date. And, hopefully that will allow for us to process those individuals that are exiting, and hopefully avoid having, this will be two mechanisms put in place to avoid having overpaid. So just something that I wanted to propose. It kind of ties into the compensation piece, because it would change from 26 pays to 24 to 25 pays. And again, I would definitely be interested to hear the feedback from faculty as it relates to that proposal.
Question.
Absolutely.
About how many people every year don't bother to notify you that they're not coming back?
So this is my first year, and I did ask that question yesterday. We already have 2 this year. In previous years, I think total over the last 3 years, I think we had like maybe 6. So we're averaging like two per year. That have impact, but
Horrible.
It's a last minute notification. That's the challenge.
The problem with that is that, again, I'm talking about this from a system limitation standpoint. Our existing system is almost, instead of it being like a normal HRS system, it's almost like coding. So you literally have to touch an employee's record multiple times in order to enter employee data for every single employee. So it's problematic. And then in addition to that, you have to have payroll go in, and then they have to do like a line item check for every single employee to ensure that everything is accurate. And that impacts everything from benefits to payroll, to deductions, state, federal deductions, etc. So it's more or less trying to make sure that we conform to the confines of our system and avoid having an issue where where we have to go back and recoup funds from those individuals who either failed to notify, or they do notify us, but it's at the last minute. So that's
So as I understand it, what we would want to hear your feedback on, and if you're agreeable, tweak our proposal to change on the first issue from 26 pay periods, you have higher paychecks, but either 25 or 24 pay periods, so that you're not getting paid in advance. We're going to have to try and track down. And then 2, of providing some notice period for faculty to say, hey, we're not coming back. Hopefully cures that problem. I don't know if it would.
I just had a quick comment of curiosity. Out of curiosity, how the certain paychecks that we get a bit more on because they don't have to do all the deductions.
3 days per month.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No,
It's early for me. So how does that impact it if we go to 24? I mean,
so it wouldn't, except for if 3 pays fall within August. So essentially what you're referencing is right now, everyone's pay is based off of essentially bi-weekly. So you get 2 paychecks per month. In a month where you have 3 paychecks, we do the deductions on the first 2, and then the last paycheck, you would have your state deductions, federal things of that nature, but you would not have benefit deductions from that.
Okay.
So that would not change. That would stay the same. So you would still see an even higher increase in that amount because you're not deducting on that 3rd pay for benefits.
Oh, okay. Okay, I was just curious if you go to 24, because currently, I guess there's 2 pay periods where we don't have, not everything comes out on 2 of them. Because I guess, like you say,
2
there's
months.
3 pay periods in a month. Okay.
Yeah, that's predicated by the month that have 3 pay periods in it.
Okay.
That's really what that's all about. So that would not impact any faculty's salary.
Okay.
So if you had 24 pay periods, that means that you wouldn't get on salary for a month of July.
No, you would. So the proposal would go all the way through to July would be the last paycheck.
So there would be 2 pay periods
Mhm.
where you have no money.
That's correct. That is correct. But you will have more money coming in now because
So
you're
you have
having
to save like
August, right.
3/4 of your salary all year to make it through July. Right.
it is the, unfortunately, the byproduct of that. It would create a blackout period for faculty. You would still be on the same pay schedule as everyone else. However, we're not front loading pay, and then if individuals don't return for the upcoming year, we are in a situation where we have to like kind of track those funds down. So.
Could you just, for new hires, like,
So this doesn't impact new hires. So,
right, so instead we get paid behind instead of ahead?
Backloaded. Isn't that what
So
they do
it'll
more
be,
in K-12?
that's correct. So your new hires currently, when they start on 14, their first paycheck is going to be on 21.
Right. Okay.
So it will follow that same guideline basically. Instead of it just being for new hires, it will be for all faculty because of the way the calendar works.
Could you do it, this may be the K-12 where there was 1 year of doing this. I don't know what our system's capable of. 1 year of doing it where there was a blackout period, and then you backload it so that your pay at the beginning of August when new contracts start, those paychecks relate more toward the prior academic year.
I mean,
which I think you would need to, if I'm thinking about it,
so
logistically, you'd have to still have a blackout period, maybe one time like this year. And so you would always be getting paid a paycheck behind, if you will.
So I will have to look into that. That would satisfy the concerns that you have about having two pays where you're not bringing in anything. I will have to look at our existing systems to see if the capability is even there to do such a thing. But I mean, that again, it is a valid concern. But I'm also looking at it and saying, just from, you can imagine we have one payroll person. So that one payroll person is the one that's trying to do payroll for everybody, all 900 or so to include our adjuncts. So that's where a lot of the issues come into play.
Would the new enterprise
ERP.
whatever it is, would that solve the problem?
Hopefully. So we have HR and finance. We have our first meeting with them tomorrow to try to, but I don't know if we're going to dive that far into get that far into the weeds with them on that first initial meeting. But I would say hopefully. I would think that we would have more flexibility with the newer system to do a lot more things than our current system. Unfortunately,
yeah, and what I'd say is, consider that, talk amongst yourself, tell us what your thoughts are on it. If it's something that you can help us address, we're looking to do that. I don't know if it's the kind of thing that we need to hold up everything on. It seems to me we can agree to some of, here's the big picture. We are proposing 2% this year, and then those things we can also continue to discuss if need be, and it might depend on what the capabilities turn out. But it is an issue that with the current system certainly is something that's difficult to administer, so we're trying to figure out a way to alleviate it. So that's our package for this morning. We're open to it. Yeah, sure.
In INM during where is there something that says that if you're not going to return next year, that you're supposed to notify administration by a certain date? I thought there was some date, something must have been taken out.
I'm unaware of that. I can do some research behind that. I have not seen any language that requires a reporting date. I think I've looked at it enough, but I'll go back and check it again. I was actually trying to find something similar to K-12 where they have to notify by like August or April as to their intentions to return for the upcoming year. And I was trying to find similar language, and I was unable.
I thought there was, but I made a mistake.
Is there any actual contract? And
Like the continuing
reviewing the contract for the next year.
I'll take a look at it.
The college has an obligation to notify non-renewals by date certain. And the byproduct of this also is that it would also help the institution address student needs and the lack of faculty for a particular class that has now been scheduled for a particular faculty member, and then we have that last minute choice to not return, and that leaves the college with a vacancy that may or may not be filled. So whether then a full-time faculty member has to step up and do an extra pay, or we have to reconfigure someone's load, or try to procure adjunct faculty. And sometimes it becomes very difficult to do that.
Anyone have any other questions about the payroll? Okay, just a couple other questions. In Article 7, kind of noticed this and started thinking about it a little more after our last session, and just kind of curious as to your thoughts. Near the bottom, Section 2, Number 4, that employee performance evaluations, disciplinary history, and work history. Just a couple of questions, thoughts. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit. Say you've got two employees. One has, and just using general terms here, has, over the last, say, 3 years, good, fair evaluations. The other employee is good. The good employee has a verbal reprimand. How would they stack up against each other with evaluations, discipline, work history kind of all being thrown into the same category?
Yeah, I think that's tough to answer without the context. I mean, I can only tell you that historically what other places have been. It really depends on the circumstances. So not all reprimands are equal, obviously. When you're reprimanded, maybe get a reprimand yesterday and you're making decisions might carry a little more weight than reprimand 10 years ago, that kind of thing. Same thing with evaluations. Evaluations even with the same score, maybe one's better than the other depending on how the subcategories stacked up. So the reason it's kind of included all together is, in my mind, these are sort of equal or could be equal, but all of that is really going to be fact specific. It's hard to put it more specific. Obviously, the one backstop you have all of this, if you think the decision's unfair, is the grievance process. If it's, in my experience with arbitrations over this type of issue, is arbitrators look at it as kind of weighing one against the other, all these factors. It's very subjective when you get to that level. But if one's clearly like this and you go the other way, then you're going to get overturned. If it's about equal, then they tend to go with the employer's discretion on that. So to me, it's these categories are relatively equal, but if you think it's misapplied, it's usually subject to grievance. So that kind of keeps the employer in check on
that. What things other than evaluations and discipline would be considered work history in this context?
Yeah, work history is sort of a catch-all. It's all the things that are probably subsumed in evaluations, qualifications, credentials, all of those things, but it's really a nod towards you can't kind of articulate all of the potential. We can try and get more specific on those kinds of things, but it might be just those kinds of things, how involved you are in committees, things of that nature. You have somebody who's very active in that, somebody who's not, the college is probably going to give you a little bit more of a bump if everything else being equal, that sort of thing.
I guess, and this is not, I don't want this to come across as a just projection of the change you made, although this is obviously something we'll have to talk about, but I think part of the appeal of having the length of service kind of above that was, that may tend to resolve, once you go through the first 4 criteria, those are all pretty objective, I think. And those are probably going to resolve a lot of the disputes before we even get to them. So by kind of moving it below that one that's a little more squishy, that raises the concern of, okay, well, are we going to get into these subjective things and then have to worry about dealing with grievances over it? That's kind of why I'm asking the question.
Well, and I understand there is an appeal to making it as objective as possible. The flip side to that is that these decisions often are fairly subjective at some level, and I think can't ignore that, frankly, that aspect. Everybody wants it to be very objective, but the bottom line is what we want to do if we ever are faced with this situation is make sure we have retained the individuals who are most qualified for the mission of college and the students in that. sometimes, and a lot of times I would expect like length of service would be a huge factor in that. You would expect more experienced people to check all these boxes. But sometimes that's not the case. So that's why we would be troubled with putting that above that criteria, because you get down to that level and then we don't want to always have to go with the most experienced person, because there are times when it's not. That's not to say it's not an important factor. It probably is one of the most important factors. And one of the things, and maybe it's something we haven't discussed this yet on our side, but I think we'd probably be open to is some of our contracts, I'm sure you've seen them, have a clause that say, you know, when these top 4 things are relatively equal, then the tiebreaker goes to seniority. And that, I think we would probably live with that. You have to wordsmith that language. And the other potential compromise there is to put 5 and 4 together, essentially put them all on the same footing, which I'm not sure I wouldn't oppose. I don't know, but length of service, in other words, performance evaluation history, that kind of thing, all being of equal merit. So it doesn't look like one is above the other. That's not really the intent here, but to put service above those others, I think runs the risk that you end up selecting somebody who's not the most qualified for the position.
Okay, I mean, we'll think about it. It's just something that occurred to me when thinking about this.
Can I pose how the college has processed layoffs before? Right?
Well, seldom happens. We're in the habit of doing that, but the most recent reduction in force was basically due to program and area needs. Number 2, the program was no longer viable. The enrollments were poor. There was a consistent pattern of low enrollments. There were some accreditation standard changes. College weighed the ability to meet those accreditation standards with these low enrollments. We also saw the industry projections did not support the program. So it became a very difficult decision to do a teach out with those students, inform SAC COC, our accreditor, and eventually reduce the force of that faculty member. So that was the key driver. Those are the key drivers for us, programmatic.
And that happens all over
Right.
the country, education. So why, if that is the kind of main forces, economic forces that drive this issue, is it really so important that these 4 go first if it's not actually the issue?
Well, recall, we provided these to you in a non-ordered format. It was the union that came back with a descending order. So for us, we put them all, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but an equal weighing based on the subjectivity of the consideration. So you came back with the hierarchy. So we would be open to
Well, and the silver lining,
clarification.
The idea you bring up is important, because the silver lining
Yes.
is it doesn't happen very often.
Correct.
And if it's going to be even less that you get all the way down to 4 and 5. That's really only in that limited context where you're not doing away with the program for those reasons, but you're keeping some and having to lay off others within the program in all likelihood, which, knock on wood, shouldn't happen. And if it does happen, it's going to be very infrequent. So, that's the nature of an initial contract. You get down into the minutiae of things that probably won't happen. If it does happen, however, we want to make sure we keep the most qualified people. But I would be a little surprised if we ever had to trigger this anytime soon, to be honest with you. So on one hand, I can see what your point is. Well, why, it's not that important. Why not bump it? I'll say the opposite. I'll say the opposite to you. If it's not that important, why not agree to ours?
Just put them all in there. They're just under the consideration, without having to necessarily, painstakingly focus on a ranking.
Occasionally this kind of thing happens, but higher education is fortunately not the one where you typically get down into the weeds over these things. And that's why I say maybe a compromise is to put them all on equal footing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'd point back to this is one that would be subject to the grievance and arbitration process. So if you get 5-10 years down the road and the college administration says we're going to keep you and get rid of you, and you think it's just totally off base, and that's where you've got that backstop arbitrator's going to say, yeah.
Right, and I was also to say that Section 3 also was built into this as well for the recall process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not it's just a one size, like, okay, yeah, we're cutting people. You still have the clause in there that states that for a period of 1 year from the layoff period, the individual would essentially have first right of refusal for positions for which they qualify for. They still will have to apply, obviously, but if they apply, they meet the qualifications, and they're an impacted individual, then at that time, they, we'll identify that person for said jobs.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with subsection A's got some protections, obviously, too. If there's other vacancies, adjuncts, things of that nature, then you're not, full-time faculty's not gonna get laid off. So hopefully that minimizes the chances and provides the protections. But that's basically our proposal, and to the extent work history is a little bit broad and it's sort of a catch-all, we entertain how to make that more specific. It's just difficult to articulate all the circumstances that this could arise 10 years down the road. But we're certainly not wed to that particular phrase.
Okay, well, we'll think about it. Discussion was helpful here. I noticed that this one article wasn't here. I'm taking that to mean that you're not making anything here conditional on agreement to any particular district proposal?
Correct.
Okay.
We'd still have some hurdles and gaps to overcome with discipline, candidly, and we didn't want to make it part of the package.
Okay. On Article 12, and we haven't really looked at this in a while either, so someone on my team hears me misspeak or misstate something, definitely jump in. But I believe in our proposal, our intent was to track current IMM practice and whatnot in the recertification and the promotion and rank pieces. I think in our proposal, kind of try to condense it down a little bit because it was a fairly long set of things. But that was intended to be editorial and not really substantive. But if you want to do a copy paste there, it's probably not going to be a huge issue for us. But I think we did have some more substantive changes to the continuing contract process. So I was wondering if you had any specific comments on the alterations we had proposed to the current IMM practice on that.
Well, I can only offer a general comment in that regard, and anybody else can chime in, is that we felt like the existing system was fine as is. I don't know if there's a specific proposal that you had you want to comment on. I'm trying to pull up yours here.
Well, I think this is something we can talk about in the caucus, but I just wanted to see if there was anything specific we could go back with. But I think we can go talk about it and see, what were the changes we made, how important do you think we are, and I think we can come back and talk some about that. Right.
I think some of the concerns, if I'm remembering it right, might be confusing, and I apologize.
Like the timing.
The timing
was
was
an issue.
a little bit rigid and was a concern. By the way, I just remembered, the one I emailed you is different, but there is a typo. On our title, it should really be continuing contract recertification and rank instead of promotion. We just refer to as recertification, figure promotion we run through the compensation. So that is a typo, but the one I emailed you, I corrected it after we printed it.
Okay. Those are the only questions I had.
And I did, on the recertification, I did see what you guys did, kind of trying to boil it down a little bit more as opposed to the long list of various things, and started to do the same thing, and it just got to be a little too ambiguous and confusing. So, kind of the thought was just put it all in there. As tedious as it is, and some of the stuff, and it really is just straight from the IMM. None of that's changed, except I think we had changed the title of one of the departments. The e-learning department the title's been updated since the IMM. So,
and Brian, if I may, on page 3, we added the first paragraph under reflective critique. Additionally, during each year of employment prior to being placed on a continuing contract, the faculty member must provide his or her academic dean with an annual update to ensure that the member is on track to successfully complete the continuing contract requirements. The faculty member may satisfy this requirement by including this update on his or her annual self-evaluation form. So as you know, we currently use a self-evaluation form. So rather than having an additional process to add on the faculty of how to report it, we just determined to use that form to express this is where I am in the continuing contract process. And this, because the onus and responsibilities on the dean to make sure that the dean is shepherding that faculty member through this process, we also want to make sure that the faculty member gives regular updates on where he or she is in the portfolio review, because we have had instances where at the very last moment, the last year, or quite frankly, the last semester prior to the deadline, the faculty member identified that they were very deficient in a lot of the key requirements, and then hustled to try to get it done, which clearly was a problem. So we want to make sure that throughout this process, it's a 5-year process, that the faculty member, thank you very much. Appreciate it. The faculty- that was just reaffirmed by whatever was speaking. That's it. That's the faculty saying, yes, we'd like to provide an update. We're excited about what we're doing with the continuing contract. So
Well,
that's the
and
reason.
that reminds me, one thing that you'll see in section 1A on page 1, that is a little bit of a difference from the IMM
Yes.
board policy.
That's right.
And this goes along the same lines as the language that we kept. You have, the 5-year requirement up through 7, but we made the language a little stronger that the expectation is 5 years. You get 5 years to do it, and the 7, using the full 7 is should be for extenuating circumstances, which goes hand in hand with why we want to make sure that annual updates are provided so that we can make sure everybody's on track. Trying to get people to look at it and do it. I want to do it in 5 years as opposed to waiting for 7, thinking it's automatic. So that 1A is the language at the end there where we tried to encapsulate that thought. But that's a little bit different.
Okay, I understand. Any other questions from continuing on? Okay, so I think we just have some stuff to talk about.
You want to do a caucus?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Oh, before I forget, on our tracking sheet, I was on leave last week, didn't get a chance to update it, but I will do that and I'll send a editable version.
Pam will be most happy.
I asked where it was. Did you send it yet? Please don't make me do this.
No, I was out of state last week, so I'll get what I have updated, I'll send it to you. Should be by Thursday.
All right. We have a room over there?
Yeah, the same one we've been
You wanna-
going to, and they can stay here.
You can stay here. You want to just let us know when you're ready?
Okay. Yeah.
We'll be-
Maybe 11 or so.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make no assumptions about readiness. So just reach out, knock on the door, be bold. Thank you.